Last week we talked about the importance of the upper room, and we spent some time trying to identify what the upper room is. And I hope that you came away from that feeling as if either you need some upper room time, or that your desire and heart for working in the church and working for Jesus is anchored in the upper room. And I told you last week that we were going to talk specifically about a spiritual track of development. Let me be clear that when we talk about discipleship, churches of Christ have had quite a negative history with it. Number one, discipleship can mean very different things to different people. Yeah, I would even say, try it out. Go out and ask your friends one at a time, hey, define discipleship for me. And you're going to get definitions that are different. Ask them a further question. Hey, how is someone discipled? And see how many definitions you get. The truth of the matter is, whatever definition you get, if people aren't being transformed into the image of Jesus and being committed to the ways, works, and words of Jesus, then they're not being discipled. They might be busy, they might be nice people, they might be your best friends, but they're not being discipled. Discipleship in our history has two negative connotations. One is called the Crossroads movement, and the other was called the Boston movement, or now called the International Churches of Christ. These movements were strong on discipleship, heavy on accountability, and where they began to lose some of their luster was in the legalistic fashion with which discipleship took shape. In other words, it was kind of like a pyramid scheme, a marketing ploy. You bought into the discipler, that discipler had authority over your life, and they ruled your life in such that they could help make decisions for your finances, for your family, for your spouse, and for your children. It began to be so negative, people began to be hurt and need counseling. Many people even committed suicide because of the heaviness of this form of discipleship. Folks, that's not the biblical form of discipleship. Discipleship is a very unique thing created by God for us. It is a process of maturation, maturity, growing, sanctification, in which the person that wants to be discipled or is being discipled is actively maturing in Jesus and learning how to love, learning how to pray, learning how to care, learning how to study. And they are growing in their own unique way. I mentioned last week that there was no unique formula for discipleship. I think that's intentional. And the reason it's intentional is because cultures change and shift all the time. You know, if I committed myself to the Jewel Miller film strips the rest of my life, I would be out of touch with reality. Why? Because, well, number one, film strips are no longer a thing unless you're at the movies, right? They're no longer a thing. Those methods change, and as those methods and as those cultures change, so does the forms of discipleship we use. The methods in which we teach, the things in which we say, the examples in which we use. So what we've looked at as we have scoured all the ministries at Gateway is we have decided we are accidentally doing some things very, very well. And I say accidentally in the most humble way I possibly can, because it's very humbling when you read what is successful from other churches and you say to yourself, wow, we're doing that and I didn't even realize we were doing that. It shows that God is doing the work, not you. And that's what's so humbling for us, is to be in this position where we kind of get to help craft and hone where we're headed moving forward. So where are we headed moving forward? Well, that has many layers to it, but let me help by trying to define the layers. Number one, we will continue to have programs. Matter of fact, we will even say that one of the first things we want to do is help our people serve somebody. We want to say plug into a ministry, but that's not where maturation ends. That's really where it begins. Let's say you plug in to be a teacher in the elementary worship, or elementary Bible class or adult Bible class? Are you just handed a book and then pushed into a room and left alone? Or are you growing with someone as you study that book with someone who has read it? Are you held accountable to how you're studying and how you're preparing? Are you growing in such a way that you are excited about the material you're teaching? Are you being prayed for constantly by people that are interested in your development? In other words, are you shoved into a class and expected to perform, or are people walking along with you as a teacher and helping disciple you along the way? It's not an authority issue where somebody controls another. It is walking step by step with somebody who has either been there or who is taking personal interest in you getting there. And so we took all of the ministries of Gateway and said, okay, how can discipleship emanate from this model? So for example, we've got the men's ministry. You plug into the men's ministry, you're going to get to do some fun things. Mostly you're just going to eat, let's be honest. You're going to eat and talk about things, manly things, and you're going to go throw some axes at some wood. I don't know. I'm not that toxic masculine to think that that's all my masculinity is. It's also crying at movies as masculine. At least my wife thinks so. So, we take the men's ministry. You plug into the men's ministry, you make a relationship. Young adults, we've got tons of young adults, young marrieds. You plug into that, an event that they're hosting, you go to a party that they're doing, you're involved in some activity in the way that they're serving, you make relationship. Small groups. You plug into a small group, you go to that person's home, you may host them in your home, you're watching The Chosen together, or you're studying a passage of scripture together, or you're praying together, or you're worshiping together, and you're in fellowship with people, right? The ladies' ministry, the Soul Sisters, you go, Heartfelt Friends, you are going to sit with some ladies at their house and have some tea and cakes. I don't know, this is not Great Britain, but you're doing these things. And when you're doing these things, before we've had these events and you kind of go away and you feel like, oh man, I feel pretty good about that. That was fun. I'd like to do that again sometime. But what if we strategized a way to say, hey, we're glad you're here. We want you to enjoy this event. But we, the leaders of this event, are going to be specific into investing in your life in such a way that, hey, we're going to ask you, hey, why don't you go through this with us? And why don't you experience Jesus with us in this way? In other words, discipleship is happening from plugging in. Does that make sense? We don't want to stick you in a program and let you rot there. There are so many stories of people who burn out doing ministry because they've served their time. Almost like, I've served my time in the military, it's time for me to retire. I've served my time in the workforce, it's time for me to retire. I've been serving the church the whole life, it's time for me to, wait a minute. That's not the church. That's not the church. The church is a holy vocation that should be filling and continual, not run out. So if we are wanting to become active, then that means our programs, our lower room events have to be the starting point, and discipleship has to take people by the hand and lead them with them into the upper room. That's education. That's in prayer, right? That's experiencing God in ways that they might have never experienced. Let's go even further. We have largely gendered the term discipleship to stand for men leading others to Christ and discipling them. Where are our ladies? Guess what? Many of them are involved in other spiritual activities. They're leading a Beth Moore study. They're involved in BSF, Bible Study Fellowship. They're doing holy things. They're talking on the phone. They're traveling together. They're talking about Jesus. They're experiencing God together. Those women are discipling people. Sometimes we pay a minister to disciple others. We say to a single youth minister, hey, please disciple our children. But their children go home and experience a lower room family who has upper room desires for them. But because all they model is the lower room, the children never have it impressed on them that the upper room is important. and they end up falling away. Don't ever stick your kid with one person and expect them to develop your children. Don't ever do that. That's your responsibility. So how can we then create a discipleship model within the teen ministry to say, hey, adults, young professionals, young marrieds, how can you invest in teens in a safe way that helps them grow in their faith, that encourages them to want to be like you because they see Jesus in you? That's healthy discipleship. So we've got that model. We've mentioned Soul Sisters. We've mentioned men's ministry. I know I'm leaving out some. There's so many. But one of the things that you're going to begin seeing as we begin putting, meat on the bones of this plan is you're going to begin to be asked to plug in. That's where I was going with my next point. Discipleship is not for the young only. It is for the old as well. There's some of us that feel like, oh, that's great, they're doing that. No, you need to be plugged in and growing as well. Let me ask you a question. If you might be a little experienced in life, let's say over the age of 50, maybe 55, maybe 60, maybe 75. What is the general stereotype of old people? What is it? That we get grumpy, that we get stuck in our ways. Hey, guess what? That's because we're lower room people. If we're upper room people, we're always going to be challenged to be more like Jesus. It's a common understanding that if you're a minister in a church, when you see someone old walking up to you, someone that's seasoned in life, you don't feel safe. You feel like you're about to be threatened. You're about to hear something that they're uncomfortable with. Why is that? Well, because it's earned. It's earned. Many ministers are scared to death because many of our older generations have retired from their faith because they feel like, I've learned it all, now I'm just kind of enjoying life. I mean, even Proverbs talks about the health of constant discipleship. It talks about the fact that old wise men who grow long beards, right, love their families, experience life with others. It's this involvement in this kingdom that matters. These men and women who take pride in their quiver, right? Their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. Don't ever stop developing in your faith. Always look to be discipled. I'll remember the first time I ever went into a doctor's office and looked into the eyes of my doctor and thought, are you a teenager wearing a white coat? Because you look like my son. And here's this medical professional who's 20 years younger than me. And I'm thinking, good grief. I'm not trusting this guy with my medical needs. And then he wowed me with his knowledge and his professionalism, and I was blown away. Right? Think about it this way. If we can never humble ourselves to grow because someone is younger than us, then the problem is we have never matured past the lower room. We have to go back to the upper room, and we have to have a process. The process for us is taking our programs, our events, and our things to plug people in and then develop them spiritually into the upper room. So specifically, you'll be seeing that on our future website. You'll be seeing that in the discussions that we have on stage. You'll be experiencing that if you place membership with Gateway. All of those things are leading you to a point of discipleship. Not control, not in the negative ways our history has defined discipleship, but in a positive way that pushes you toward being committed to the ways, words, and works of Jesus. I hope you have a wonderful week.